Good morning, everybody. This is Rama on Riding coming to you live from a beautiful, soon-to-be sunny Kailua Kona, Hawaii. We've had a great week here, not much rain, lots of sun. And I understand that back in Arizona and New Mexico, they've actually had some nice weather this week. It's cooled down a little bit. So that's a great thing for the summertime. Some of the rains are happening, and of course, in the desert, rain is a very important component. It's not quite as important in Hawaii, although over the years it seems to have gotten a little bit drier here on the Big Island than as I remember in the past. Today we are very fortunate to have a new author in the hot seat. James Parker has just finished his book, and I saw a picture of him holding it in hand. He looked very happy. It's been, I think that books tend to take close to a year many times from when we go to our first retreat to when we actually have the book in hand. And I think that in James' case, it was not quite a year, so he did a good timeline. He has a very long book, so he's had to read it quite a few times, so he's probably got it memorized by now. Well, a good author interview starts with the author kind of sharing a little bit about who they are, maybe independent of them as an author. So, James, give us a little insight into who you are, maybe where you grew up, what kind of things, float your boat, so to speak. And we'll start with that, and then I'll ask you some questions about the book. And once we get through some of the dialogue, we'll let the group ask you some questions.
Okay. Good morning, by the way. I was just trying to think about who I am. And I figured out that I'm nothing but an old Texan, I guess, that grew up in New Mexico and kind of left my Texas roots behind, I guess. But about writing, I think you mentioned at one point why I started writing and a little bit of background in that. I noticed as I got older that my emails got longer and longer, and I was wondering if people were even reading them or not. And I would write somebody and I would just write, and then I would change it and try to correct it. And I got to enjoying writing these boring emails, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to write something a little more interesting than just sending emails about computers and things like that. So that kind of got me going. But what really got me working on my book is my daughter. A couple of years ago, I had a seizure that lasted 3 days, and I thought I didn't think I was going to die because I was in the seizure. I was like out of it. But my daughter's an MD, and she thought I was going to die. And so when we came out of all this seizure business, Nikki, my daughter, said, "Dad, I don't know much about you. Would you write something about growing up on a farm? Not many people have been raised on a farm, and so I'd kind of like to read it." And when she said she didn't know much about me, it kind of shocked me because I have 2 daughters, and I've spent most of my life doing stuff with them and getting to know them and things like that. And it's harder for fathers and daughters, I think, to connect than maybe fathers and son. With a son, maybe I don't know, I never had any sons, but you can go out and play baseball with them and I don't know, throw rocks. And with daughters, you can too. And I did a lot of that stuff. And so we spent a lot of time playing Little League softball. We spent a lot of time going to the lake, camping, hiking, things together. So one of the reasons I wrote this book is I wanted to, one of my two daughters in my family who sort of know who I was, and it was fun to do. That's all I know about that subject.
So, James, the first question I have, when you were talking about a Texan moving to New Mexico, what do you feel the big difference between Texas and New Mexico is?
Well, there's a lot of dirt in both places, so they're a lot the same, and a lot of people that live in New Mexico are from Texas, and a lot of people who live in New Mexico don't like Texans a whole lot. When I first moved, when I was a kid, I first moved to New Mexico, to Alamogordo, New Mexico. I thought, being from Texas, of course, they brainwash you in Texas. They give you all these Texas history books and things like that, and they have you singing all kinds of patriotic songs. So I thought when I moved to New Mexico, everybody would be really glad to see me because I was a Texan, and that didn't work out that way. They were kind of, oh, you're from Texas. And even my school teacher, when I went to my first, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Big Spring, Texas. He said, well, I guess I won't hold that against you, So there's some differences, but really New Mexico and Texas aren't that different. It's just the scenery probably is a lot prettier in New Mexico than it is in Texas. Where I lived in Texas, you could look out my front door, and excuse me, how some people have to be convinced the world is round. Well, when you're from West Texas, the world is round. You can look as far as you can see, and you can see the curvature of the earth. It's pretty obvious. Oh, yeah, the world's round. That's easy.
So, James, have you always thought of yourself as a storyteller, or is that something that really just came out in writing this book?
I always liked listening to stories, but I never thought of myself really as a storyteller. But I find out that I come from a bunch of real talkative Irish people, and I used to sit around when I was a kid and listen to stories. And my aunts, my dad had 3 sisters, and they were funny talkers. I mean, they could talk nonstop, and they could, like, if they're talking about Rama, they would be imitating your verbal things and all like that, just like, kind of change voices, and they would become Rama, and they would talk real fast, and then they would switch over and they would become somebody else. And so I could just sit and listen to those stories for forever, and I do still remember them. And I don't remember a whole lot about just the past in general. I remember, Kennedy was killed and all that. But when I started thinking about these stories that my aunts used to tell and my family used to tell, I can remember it, and I remember it better than I thought I could, And so anyway, it makes it a lot easier when you can remember those stories, and they told them in such a way they got my interest so much. I mean, some of the stuff I'm not even sure is true, but it was something I still remember. My aunt and my aunts and my dad and my family used to sit around and talk about what it was like when they were younger. And big sin in Texas, one of the big things that was a sin was being a horse thief. It's like, well, did you hear about so-and-so? He robbed the bank and he killed the guy. Hell, he was even a horse thief, And so the horse thief was sort of like the worst thing you could be in Texas. There were a lot of things, but it just got a lot of visibility from people talking about criminals and things like that. They would always bring up a horse thief. And now that there are cars in Texas, and there's a whole lot of cars in Texas, horses aren't important at all.
So, James, I know you're a little bit older than myself, and when I moved to Arizona, back, almost 30 years ago, I still felt that there was a bit of the Wild West going on there. It seems to me that you would have really been brought up in the Wild West. Do you remember that as a component of your upbringing?
Well, we used to live over near Lubbock, and it's called the Breaks. And the Breaks is where the plateaus sort of start dropping off. And we used to, when I was a kid, we used to go, my dad and I used to go hunting, bird hunting and things like that. And we would see all kinds of animals, and it was fun to do. But the real part of the Wild West that I didn't like, one thing that really I don't like about the Wild West is the way, and I'm not trying to be some kind of animal lover, but I am. And people would like run off the road to run over your dog. In Texas, that we didn't have fences. We were too poor to have a fence a lot of times. But I used to have a beautiful collie that would wait by the road out by the highway for my mother to come home. Well, people would run off the road and run over your dog, and I mean, it was just stuff like that going on. There was a lot of good people. I love Texans. They're great people, but there's just a lot of, I don't know, nastiness that goes on in some of these hick towns and things like that. People used to bring dogs, and since we lived out in the country, they'd drop them off at our house. And so at one time we had 20 cats and 7 dogs, and really only 2 cats and 1 dog were ours, and all the rest were just dropped off in our front yard. So that's kind of part of the Wild West. One of the things I did too is I did a little research into where the area where I grew up, and I read some books. I read a book I named S.C. Gwynn, and he wrote about the Comanches. And so I bought a book about Quanah Parker. I thought, well, maybe I'm related. I don't think I am, but it was pretty interesting reading about West Texas. And buffalo roamed right there. I never knew that when I was a kid. There was buffalo roaming in West Texas, and they left, I guess, all kinds of indentions in the land out there where they would wallow around and things like that. But the real thing, I guess, the real wild thing about West Texas that I don't know much about was the Comanche Indians. Holy God! I mean, it changes your whole outlook on life, and a lot of this stuff isn't in my book, but I just think about it a lot now when I found out how wild, really, really wild West Texas it was with those Comanches. They were scary. Anyway, I liked looking that up. One of the things I did in my book, I've always wanted to know who I am. So I got into ancestry and doing genealogy, and I knew I was part Native American and so on. So I found out they do these DNA studies, and I've had a bunch of DNA tests done, and I find out that I'm like around 55% Irish, and they can tell just by what you inherit. And I thought, well, they're some of the best writers in the world are from Ireland. Maybe I can write, and it gave me a little confidence just knowing that maybe I have the right DNA. And I don't know if I do or not, but it's kind of nice to have something going for you. It's like, well, I'm from Ireland. I don't know how to write. I'll write it in Gaelic. Well, that isn't the way it works. but it's I did get a lot of good feeling from doing DNA studies. And so what I did in the book is I kind of did a layman's interpretation of these DNA studies. And it's not real scientific, but I just had fun talking about what it would be like, to have done some of the things that, like if you're part Native American, everybody thinks you grew up in, in the United States, but there was a lot going on in Europe and in Asia with the Indians walking across the to the New World. And so I just talked about that. Made a lot of it up. But then there's a lot of true stories that I've added from my own life. I'm just rambling on. Let's move on.
Well, that's what an interview is having the interviewee talk. Now, James, we've established that you are a storyteller. So the question I have for you is, would you share maybe a couple of your favorite stories from your book? And if you want to read them from your book, I know it's kind of you didn't prepare, but if you prefer to read them from the book, you can, or you could just ad lib and just tell us some of your favorite stories.
Okay, yeah, I'd rather just tell you one. There are several stories here. When I was a kid, I was always racing cars. I mean, I was an idiot. I was just, all I could think about was cars. And I would speed, and I would get in trouble for speeding. And I remember one time I was I was driving back from Las Cruces to Alamogordo. I don't know if any of you, it's kind of a long road with a couple of friends of mine. And up ahead of us, this car ran off the road, and I mean, it hit the dirt, and dirt was flying, all kinds of, looked like it was going to be a wreck, just all kinds of stuff happening in this little one-car accident. So the guy runs off the road. We pull over behind him and go look at him and see if he's okay. Another friend that I knew was there, and the guy was sitting there with blood all over his face. And this was back in the I think it was like early 70s, late 60s, where we didn't have airbags, and so this guy was pretty beat up. We pulled him out of his car, and we brought him into the hospital about 10 miles away in Alamogordo. And we talked to the guy, and we asked him what was going on, how come he had the car wreck. And he said, well, he was a judge, and he had worked late the night before, and he was tired, and he fell asleep at the wheel. And so he ran into the dirt and, hurt himself pretty bad. And so that was the last time I saw him for a while. And then I got one of my speeding tickets. I was going the other way, going from Alamogordo toward the base, and I was driving like, I don't know, probably 100 miles an hour. And a cop pulled me over, and there was like five people in the car. The cop pulled me over, and he said, you were speeding a little there, weren't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, how fast are you going? I said, 70. And the guy said, are you sure you were going 70? I think it was more like 80, wasn't it? And I said, no, it was 70. And I knew when he was asking me that question, he didn't have his radar on, so he didn't really know how fast I was going. So I was going probably closer to 80, maybe 100 in a slower speed limit. I got a ticket. He gave me a ticket, and I had to go to court. And I walked in the court and sat down, and they're calling all these people with DUIs, and I mean, just, a load of criminals. I didn't know what was going on. I, maybe 17 or 18 years old. And finally, I got to looking at the judge, and I said, who is this judge? He looks familiar. Well, he was the judge that I pulled out of the car in the car wreck, and I thought, holy crap, this guy owes me a favor, I think. We hauled him into the hospital. But I was thinking he probably doesn't know who I am, and I kept thinking, well, maybe I should tell him who I am. But then that wouldn't look real good if I said, hey, Judge, remember me? Remember when you had that car wreck and fell asleep? I'm one of the guys that pulled you out. So I couldn't say it that way, and I kept thinking, I've got to remind this guy that, he knows me. I don't want to get some ticket or, have to pay a whole lot of money. So the guy says, we have a citation here for you driving 70 miles an hour. And well, the speed limit is 75, right? And he looks over to the district attorney, and the district attorney says, well, I don't think so. I think it's 55. He was going 70 and 55. And so the attorney asked the cop, and the cop says, "Yeah, it's a 55." And anyway, the judge talks on a while longer, and finally the judge says, "Well, it looks like you were speeding. You're going 70 and a 55. That's not too bad. Case dismissed." So I don't know if he remembered who I was, but he sure paid me back, you know. He just dismissed the case. Because normally with the people that I've been seeing, there wasn't no case dismissed. Just like, your fine will be $130 or something. You know, that was back in the days when $130 was $130, you know. But anyway, that's the kind of stories I remember from growing up, and, you know, just getting in trouble. There was a lot of stuff that kids do that, you know, I don't think it was all that bad, but, you know, just one of my friends stole a parking meter head and made keys for every parking meter in town, or half of them. So they would go collecting at night, you know, and I said, "I'm not playing with you boys anymore." You know, they had their little key for the parking meter. They go up with a big sack, open it up, and pour the money in there. Anyway, that was part of my growing up, just hanging out with those guys. Not really mean people. We did get in some. We got caught up in a gang fight one time, and I thought I might get really hurt over that. You know, we were just kind of watching some gang stuff going on. You know, there's not a lot to watch, you know. So anyway, we drove around a while. And we started following this one guy that was a big gang member, and somehow it ended up being like 7 carloads of gang people, and the 4 of us in my friend's car, we were just like driving around and wanting to see what was going on. And anyway, those guys pulled over 7 carloads of people, probably 30 or 40 people, and came after us with rocks and bottles in my friend's brand new car, and it looked like it'd been through the demolition derby. And we were lucky we didn't get killed or something. They were throwing rocks at us and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, we did get to see what was going on, but we had a very bad seat. We were what was going on. Anyway, that's my West Texas, and that's Alamogordo. You know, there's a lot of stuff that went on in West Texas that, you know, when you're a little kid, it seemed like a bigger deal. You know, I remember one time they were getting ready to, you know, end school for the year, and some kid got his pants taken off and run up the flagpole at the junior high school in Big Spring. And I thought, oh man, I don't want to go to school tomorrow because they're going to do this to everybody. That was the rumor. We're going to take all the, you know, 8th graders or whatever, 5th graders, and take your pants and run them up the flagpole. And I thought, oh, I could see myself walking down the street with no pants on, you know, and I couldn't decide whether I even wanted to go to school or not. So anyway, I went to school the last day of school. It was over with. I walked out the door expecting to see some kind of riot, and it was quiet as any West Texas town you've ever seen. I thought, well, where's all this? What are they going to do about pulling pants off and running up the flagpole? Well, it was just a rumor to scare little stupid kids like me. But anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
So, James, your book is an impressive length. It's 90,000 words. I'm sure that there's lots of stories in there. Were there any stories you intentionally left out? And if so, you know, why did you leave them out? And maybe you could share 1 or 2 of those with us as well.
Well, you know, I left some stories out, and it wasn't totally intentional. And then some of the things that you leave out, maybe they're just kind of private and you don't want to, you know. One of the stories I left out is when, you know, growing up Irish, and I didn't know I was Irish, and we didn't speak Gaelic or anything like that. Just had a bunch of fighters. My dad's uncles, he had my grandfather and then 8 uncles, and they were all fist fighters. And I mean, they were mean, and I think they got it from the Irish side. I had a great grandmother that was Irish, and they said she was really mean. And anyway, we had a lot of people in my family with hot tempers. Like my one uncle, the oldest one, Uncle Bob. They used to say that if you even looked at him crossways, the next thing you would see was your shoe soles. In other words, you'd be upside down. Anyway, I can remember, and my dad was a really, really good dad, but he had a kind of a hot temper sometimes. And I remember one time, recently, my friend was over, and I've known him since we were kids, and he said, I remember when we were over at your house one day, and he said, I never wanted to leave a place so bad in my life. He said, you were getting in an argument with your dad, and your dad hit you in the jaw, and I hadn't even thought about that. It's not like he wasn't something he did all the time, but if I got in his face and was screaming in his face, he'd let me know to back off. And so evidently from what I remember, he hit me in the jaw just to shut me up, and it wasn't real hard, but the minute my friend told me about getting hit in the jaw, I remembered, and I could even kind of feel it. But anyway, there was some of that went on. My dad and I really argued a lot, but it wasn't a knockdown, drag out. But every once in a while, he would give me a backhander, and I deserved it. It wasn't like I was some little innocent kid. I was like a snotty-nosed, big mouth high school kid, that should have been told to shut up more. But anyway, that's one of the stories I remember. And there were a lot of stories that I didn't include that were like people killing animals and things like that. Well, they did a lot of that in West Texas. People would shoot your dog, or people would just do things that were cruel. They would go shoot hawks and stuff like that, and things that I just really don't believe in, but I hated to bring up too much of that kind of stuff because it's kind of depressing, to deal with animals, but because it was pretty much the Wild West. And when I would drive from like Big Spring to Lubbock, there was hardly any fences. You could see everything that went on was right in your face. You drove too fast, you'd run over somebody. I still remember, and this is a true story. Somebody dropped off a dog in front of our house, and we really came to love that dog, but we didn't have any fence to keep it in. It was just a little silly dog. And I was sitting out, and I was like 7 years old, sitting out on my front porch, and the dog wandered out in the highway, and it was just a small 2-lane highway, but people would drive fast on it. And a carload of teenagers ran into that dog at 60 or 70 miles an hour, laughing. They had a convertible, and knocked the dog completely over the top of the car, and that had a real impact on me. So I've always felt like that I need to do more to support animal humane kinds of things. When I saw the kinds of stuff that went on in West Texas with pets, so so-called pets, things that were really cruel. I didn't dwell on it in the book, but it's always in the back of my mind. And anyway, my wife is a watchdog for the Animal Humane Society, and we adopt dogs from there. And so, we try to do a little bit of payback there.
James, I know that, growing up as a kid in the Wild West, you probably have some good car stories of your own other than that speeding ticket. What was your favorite vehicle that you had over the years, and maybe share a story or two about that experience with that vehicle?
Well, I had like a 409 Chevy. Remember that song? She's real fine, my 409, or something like that. Anyway, it's a pretty fast car, and I kind of I raced a lot around, and I was just an idiot. I wasn't cool or anything like that. But when my dad found it like a 1957 Plymouth Fury at one time, and it had it was kind of a racy car. It was old, and so I rebuilt the engine. I blew up the transmission on it. I got it. I took it to get a brand new transmission. I got the transmission, and then it wouldn't race good enough. It wouldn't stay in second gear long enough. It would shift out or something. And so I went by and said, I want to show you this. My car's not running right. And ever since you guys put the transmission in, so the guy gets in the car with me, and I take it out on the road, and I says, now watch this. And I put it in second gear, and I said, it should run up to like 60 or 70 in second gear. Well, I ran it up to 60 or 70 in second gear, and I blew the engine up. So I thought, why did I do that? I could have lived with that transmission not shifting exactly right. But anyway, so I spent a lot of time working on that car. My dad was an aircraft mechanic, so he didn't care if I broke stuff as long as, we could afford to fix it, and so anyway, I learned a lot about cars on my own from breaking stuff, that kind of thing.
So, James, we've been working together almost a year on this book, and I've watched you grow. I know that at times you haven't even recognized how good a book that you wrote, based on what our editors have said. What was the hardest part of actually publishing this book? Was it writing it? Was it organizing it? Was it going through the numerous, proofs of formatting? Give us a little feeling as to, which part was the hardest for you to go through.
Well, writing the book and telling the stories was kind of easy once I got, when I sat down to write, I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? And I started doing this kind of stilted stuff. And I said, I'm not going to do this. This is boring me. And so I just started telling stories, kind of like I'm talking to you now. I just, and so written a lot of the book when it came to Tom Bird, and I liked the stories, but it wasn't laid out very well. And then I continued writing on it, and Tom started getting involved, and that's when things started making more sense. He came to me one day and he said, to review my book a little bit, and he said, well, it's a good book. And I shouldn't even tell you this because it's kind of embarrassing at first. He said, your writing kind of reminds me of Forrest Gump. And I'm thinking, oh man, that really helps. For an insecure writer to tell him to write like Forrest Gump, and he said, well, don't get it wrong. It's just the style is a little bit the way Forrest Gump was written. And he said, also, you write a little bit like Andy Griffith. And he says, Tom said, I'm from North Carolina. You used to, when I was a kid, once a week, we sat down in front of the TV and watched Andy Griffith. Well, that's the way your story's written. There's something there, a commonality between your stories and the Andy Griffith show or something like that. So anyway, by talking to Tom, he told me, well, let me just tell you about your book. He said, you don't have enough chapters. And I thought, oh man, I've already written, 200 and some pages, and I need to write more to create more chapters. And Tom says, no, what you need to do is take what you've got and break it up into smaller chapters. I had this long book and I only had maybe, I don't know, a dozen chapters. Anyway, I said, well, I don't understand what do you want me to do? And he said, well, just take a chapter, each of your stories, and make a chapter out of it. And I thought, well, okay, give me an example. And he said, well, you've got a story in there about Bob the dog. And he says, I've never heard of a dog named Bob. And he says, why don't you make that a chapter, and then go through and read and make some more chapters, kind of like Bob the dog and whatever, and I did it. It made it really easy. And I think that kind of, I found, well, a lot of people like reading books with short chapters. It's like, well, I could go to bed now, or I could just read this next chapter. It's only 5 pages long, and it kind of drags them into reading the whole book. They can't stop reading them because they've only got, like, this chapter is only 2 pages, you know. And so I think the way Tom had me format the book made it a lot easier to read, you know. So I think I could have written the book without Tom, I think, but it wouldn't have been near as good, I don't think, without Tom, you know, as he kind of, but, well, you remember he talked about, you know, the coloring, the, you know, different parts of your story, you know, the pinks and the blues and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have, you know, even though I was working on it, I really didn't have that many problems with my book needing to be rearranged. You know, it just kind of fell into place. And I was lucky there, because after I did all that stuff with the colors and, you know, formatting the book, and I didn't really have to make many changes. And I don't know if I was lucky or whatever, you know, but it was fairly easy to do, to format it, you know, thanks to Tom and Rama.
Well, you know, for those of you who don't know the story, this is my favorite story, I think, of all the authors. You know, James came to his retreat, and essentially his book was all written, okay? And he came to, you know, fine-tune the revision, and I really think that, you know, we needed to come up with something for him to do. Okay, because he really didn't want to write a second book. He wasn't in that place. And so, you know, we had been working on this color coding concept, you know, from early that same year. And, you know, we never really quite incorporated it into the retreat environment. And then coming out of James's retreat, as I say, we need to give him something to do. So we put him in the hall and we gave him poster boards and said, here, lay it out. And so he and I really, you know, kind of learned how to do the poster board together, you know, because I didn't know what to do. And it was only Tom that really had this vision as to what was really coming down. And from that point on, we incorporated the poster board and the color coding into every single retreat. And to me, it was the biggest breakthrough that I've ever experienced in the retreats. Okay, we kept on, you know, being able to get the authors to, you know, complete their first draft in a shorter and shorter period of time. But just from my experience, and I think Tom Pitts will probably confirm that, you know, initially we were kind of left on our own as to how we organized our book and how we put it together. And from, you know, working with James, we incorporated this, you know, this platform that really helped the authors organize, at least have an idea of what the heck we were doing, because most of us didn't have any clue. And prior to that, you know, and I still say that this about my first book is that, yeah, I could have pulled the chapters out of a hat, put them in, and everything would have been fine. And, you know, maybe in my book that's true, but for most and for pretty nearly all the books, there needed to be some kind of guidance for organization. And I attribute this to James, you know, just being in a place where we needed to give him something to do. You know, he came from New Mexico. He was here to do, you know, to get his book done. And we really didn't have, you know, the situation to do that. So it was really a great contribution. And I really want to thank James for that, even though, you know, he doesn't want to admit that he had anything to do with it, you know. But in all seriousness, he had something to do with creating what I think was the most monumental shift in our retreat environment. So thank you, James. Now, when you went through that process, did it make any sense at first? Did it take a while to sort through what we were after? I mean, I remember you laid out every chapter, and I think we had 3 poster boards. Kind of, maybe if you remember, give us a little insight into, you know, levels of frustration or enlightenment that may have occurred during that process.
Well, I remember, you know, Tom talking to me about the book, and he says, and he starts breaking it up. He said, it opens like this, and then the quarter of the way through, it was, you're doing this, and he broke the whole book down, kind of described, that I ought to have, more red, more action here and less here, and that was pretty straightforward. But when it got difficult is when I think you get into the details and you get off into the weeds, and if you get too deep into the weeds, you sort of lose yourself. And that's where I did. I was just, analyzing too much. I was getting it down to, well, what about if I put this half yellow and this half blue or something, all in one small area of the book. And Tom came over and was talking to me about it, and I had just gotten too far into it. You can't do this analysis and get down to every paragraph. Do you paint it red or blue or whatever, And so I think that was the hard part for me. I've worked, with computers and programming and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not really that much of a left brain person. So when I get into a lot of the details, sometimes I just keep going, and I go too far. And I think that was my biggest frustration, is learning to back off and not get too involved in the minutia. There's just so far you want to go, and I crossed that boundary. So anyway, that's the main problem I had with that, was just learning not to get too deep into the weeds, because it'll just drag you in. It's like quicksand. It just keeps dragging you in. So you have to stay at a higher level.
That goes to one of the points that I have on my revision sheet, and I have this in the biggest capital letters on the whole sheet. It says, "Do not overthink this." And I think that's the tendency, is that we now have something to work with. And so we try to apply it, we overthink it, and maybe we're making something quite simple into something difficult. James, if there is some piece of advice anywhere along the timeline that you would like to offer to authors that haven't gotten this far, what would that be?
When you tell a story, if you're, and Rama told me I'm a storyteller, but when you tell a story, just talk like you're talking to Rama, just sit down and say, okay, this is what happened, And one of the things that I did that one of the style editors talked about, and I don't know the woman's name, but she really liked my book, but she said, when you're introducing characters, you jump around, and so she said she didn't really think it was a bad thing. She said, what was it? She was kind of a computer term I used to. She didn't know if it was a feature or a bug, that I would be talking about something like this friend of mine, Don. He used to the one we got when the gang jumped us in his car, and I started talking about Don's car and how he was a real ladies' man. He had all these girlfriends. And then I jumped back and I said, back in the 60s, Don got a brand new Chevrolet, and we took it out on the Tularosa Highway, and he ran it up to 90 miles an hour, and that was right after I was talking about the gang. So I jumped from the present, or the latest, into going back to when he got this Chevrolet car, and we were driving 90 miles an hour. And Don pulled his car out of gear. It was a stick shift, and then he pulled the key out of the ignition, like he was just going to coast on and enjoy how fast he went. I don't know what we were doing, but we were going 90 miles an hour. He pulls the key out of the ignition. Well, this was the first year, I think it was like 64, where they had the steering wheel lock. So when he pulled that key out, he was going 90 miles an hour, and the steering wheel was locked, If he would have dropped the key, we'd have still been bouncing, But anyway, he was able to get the key back in and pull off the road. But the bug or the feature was that I was talking about one car situation where we were getting chased by a gang, and then the other as I jumped back to Don's driving when, like several years earlier. And so maybe it's a little bit disorganized, but the style editor seemed to like it. She said it's because I think that she liked it because I was just talking to her, we'd all talk to Rama,
I remember that style evaluation, and I think that this may have been the longest of our books that the style editor had gotten, had been handed. And her comment was, "Thank God James is a good writer." And I remember talking to James about this evaluation. And I said, "James, this is a really good evaluation." And he didn't recognize that when I said it to him. He's like, because we're so closely attached to our book that we feel, oh my gosh, it's not perfect. And I had to assure him that, James, this is really a good evaluation here. I haven't seen anything quite like this before. So it's really interesting how we interpret, whether it's criticism or direction, and so James did a great job with that. Now, here's the big question, James. Actually, I have two big questions. Okay, the first one is, where's book 2? What's book 2 going to be about?
I don't know. I've thought about that, but I think once I get through book 1 and I understand the process from beginning to end, then I think I can think about book 2. But it's just been too much for my small mind to keep all the things that I'm doing now and then throw in another book. But that's one of the things I was thinking, that I would like to write another book, but I'm not sure how if I have enough stories to tell. Eventually I'm going to run out of stories, and so I have to think about that. Or maybe I have to create some new stories, but when you get my age, the new stories aren't as exciting as they were when you were 17 years old or something, But anyway, that's a good question, and I don't know the answer. I've been looking, under the desk and things, and I haven't found that book yet, but I'll find it.
Sounds good. Because we are authors, we can make up stories and tell everyone that they really happened. That's one of the, things that we're able to do. And that's kind of a cool thing. I know that in my book, I definitely elaborate on certain things for that reason. And it's kind of interesting. Okay, James, now, I know that we have our book in hand. We have a website up. You're starting to work with Denise at this point in time. What have you done as far as the bigger digital marketing? How's your social media going? What about blogging? It seems like you do have plenty of stories that you could blog about as well that may not have quite made it into the book, or you could write them a different way. So what is your thoughts on that? What are your struggles? I know we all struggle with this component at this point. I think we all think, we can just write a book, publish it, put up a website, and then we can sit back and it'll sell. So what are some of the things that you are starting to do? I know that you have a reunion coming up that we're looking to coordinate with a launch and some other things. Give us a little insight into where things are going for you.
Well, my daughter, my elder daughter, has the one that asked me to write the book. She is going to host a book signing. It's not an official launch. I guess you'd call it a soft launch, but we're going to have about, I don't know, maybe 50 to 80 people come over to my daughter's house. She has a big house. But anyway, just, from maybe like 5 to 9 on and so, if you come over at 5 and talk a while, then you could leave. But we're going to have all those people over. I'm going to give away some of my books, just to, ask the people, if you're not going to buy my book, at least I'll give you one and you read it and give me an evaluation. Because I really don't have anything going yet. I haven't haven't announced it anywhere at all, except my daughter sent out this, it's called an Evite, inviting people to come over. And so that's the main thing I've done now. But I've kind of been looking into some of my friends that are on Facebook, and I don't know if I mentioned it to you the other day or not, but I have one group of Alamogordo high school class of 1965, and this woman kept trying to friend me after I joined this group, and I said, "Who is this woman?" And she's got 4,000 friends. She's driving me crazy trying to friend me, and then I find out she's the one that runs the high school group, and she's got 4,000 friends. And I'm thinking 4,000 friends. That would be really good if she would advertise my book to her 4,000 friends, and then I have another friend who's a politician from Alamogordo. He moved back to Alabama. He's got 3,000 something friends. And I thought, well, I'm going to impose on these people and ask them to put links to my book out there. So that's the main thing that I've done. It's just, I've thought about a lot of stuff, but I need to actually get, once Greg gets my website totally finished or a little more finished, then I'll just put a link to my website out there and see if I can get some people to buy my book and read it and review it.
Sounds good, James. It doesn't sound like you're shy in this process, and I think that that's a good lesson for all of us. That once we have our books, we do need to talk about them. We do need to, promote them, and that's one of the reasons why I do these interviews, is to get you more comfortable about talking about your book and kind of sort through which stories work and which ones, kind of fall flat. It's kind of like being a comedian. Some jokes work and some jokes don't. The ones that work, you keep on using. The ones that you don't, go into the garbage and come up with some new ones. So that's kind of this process a little bit. Well, James, it's been a delight speaking with you. At this point, if there are authors that would care to ask questions or to give James some good kudos for what his accomplishment, this is a good time. You can unmute yourself, or if you want to wave, I can unmute you as well, and we'll see if people have some questions. I know I can always rely on Tom Pitts to ask something or to give some support. So he's unmuted already, and I thank you, Tom, for being put again on the hot spot like I always do.
No, James. Yeah, I got the title for your next book.
Okay, let me write it
Deep
down.
in the Weeds.
Deep in the Weeds. Okay, I'm going to write that down.
I want to I want to hear more about you and your dad. That could be the whole book. Just stories about you and your dad. I mean, everybody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I sent you an email with a quick edit on your Amazon book synopsis.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
I did a little style edit in there, but that's just for the synopsis. I didn't want you to carry that over into your books.
Yeah, well, the synopsis,
that would
somehow, I don't know, I think somehow that my synopsis got changed a little bit because it wasn't exactly what I wrote. And so, I've been thinking about that, and then you kind of brought it to light. So I don't know if it's too late to go back and change my synopsis or not. Does this synopsis just appear on Amazon, or I'm not sure.
That one does, yeah. And also, before I get off, is your presence on video is just phenomenal. If you could just get a professional to video you talking about your book, or get some video for that book signing. Somebody can use that to great advantage for promotion. I mean, that would go viral in a little 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Super job.
Well, thank you.
Let me jump in here right now, James, because I think this is an interesting point, and I've run into it more than once. The synopsis about the book and about the author that are put up, I put those up on CreateSpace, and I essentially do that from the first draft of what you sent me about the book and about the author. Okay. Now, problem is that, you put those together, and then, through the proofing process, that all changes. Well, I can't go back to every, correction sheet and say, oh, he changed this sentence here, he changed that sentence there. So, what you can do is you can log into your CreateSpace account, and you can essentially eliminate what was there and rewrite it. There's a spot for about the book and about the author. I think it's called name description and author bio. And I did have an author that did that just this past couple of days. So that you can do. And Denise can certainly help you fill out in your Amazon Author Central page those sorts of things. And that's one of the things that she does, is she builds up the about the book and about the author in a way that has certain links attached, which gives Amazon the impression that this is a more active situation than it may really be. Okay, or provides a way to make it a more active situation. And this is one of the strategies that she uses. But you can log into your CreateSpace and you can do that. And then the other point that Tom mentioned, and this is critical for all of us. Anytime we have an event that we do a signing, a talk, it's really important to make sure that we find a 15-year-old kid to videotape it, or maybe a 25-year-old or a 40-year-old, but somebody there that has the technological know-how to hit the record button. And I kind of say that with a tongue-in-cheek. Some of us old fogies don't think about it, right? It's not that we can't do it. It's just that we don't think about this. And so, like I have an iPhone and I take lots of pictures, but I haven't shot a single video on it. And we could be doing these sorts of things more regularly. So Tom, thank you for sharing that. This is a lesson that we all need to remember, is that pictures, that's why I asked James to take a picture when you open up that envelope with your proof, and let's put that up. And I posted that on my Facebook page. A lot of people seem to have seen it and liked it. So those are the kind of things that we often forget. And so thanks for sharing that, Tom. Anyone else have any questions, comments for James?
I do.
Okay, Shira.
A few things. First of all, I really, really love this interview. You definitely don't have to worry about babbling. It's very
Thank you.
very interesting, and it's very insightful. And like I was in West Texas at a festival a couple of years ago, and this is helping me to understand a lot about the environment that I was in, because I really didn't understand it. But I also wanted to let you know that I read the thing on Amazon, and it didn't make sense because it goes from like third person to first person. But more importantly, it asked me if I wanted to take control. It basically, like, it acted as if I'm the author and I could create an author page. So I think you better get on that immediately and get your author page together on Amazon and claim that book as yours, because they don't seem to.
Why didn't you fix it for me? I'm just kidding.
Fix the bot. Yeah, sorry. I didn't feel it was my place, but I guess I could have.
That's great advice. These are the kind of things that Denise can help you with, James. So make a note and just share that, hey, someone said this, what do I do about that? Okay? Because Denise is the expert, and even though we could do this ourselves, it's good having some guidance. And I know that, working with you, you respond well to guidance. Make some notes for Denise and just share some of this perspective, because she'll fix it up in a flash.
Okay.
Let's see, Dawn, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment for James?
Yes, I just want to say congratulations. Having watched you on a number of these calls and not even knowing what your book was about. I love the calls because lots of times we don't know really what someone is writing. All we know is how they're feeling about the writing and kind of the process of it. And when I saw the picture online of you with your box and opening the book and saw the title of it, I was like, oh, wow, it's for his daughters. Like, how cool is that? I did not, for whatever reason, expect that. And I just think you're lucky, 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 fortunate daughters, because there are many of us who wish we knew more about our fathers, that we wish there had been the storytelling and the record. And you're giving them such a beautiful, beautiful gift in really the vulnerability of telling your story that they will always have. And I bet they'll ask you a lot of questions, as they read it. You'll get to tell more stories. You're a wonderful storyteller. And I've really laughed a lot during this whole time. It's been fabulous. So kudos to you.
Thank you very much. It's when you're telling the story about yourself and it's intended for your daughters, and your daughters are like, well, my daughters are way, way smarter than I am. They look after their mother. One of them is a gastroenterologist. The other is a city engineer, and they really don't need my advice,
But they need your stories.
They need the stories, exactly.
Yeah.
And Tom Bird named my book for me. I didn't, I thought, I don't know anything about naming books. I probably would, make things worse. But he named the book for me, and I just went with it. I thought, why wouldn't I? This guy's got a lot of experience, and I have zero. And even if he's a little bit wrong, he'll be a lot more right than I am about which is a good title, So anyway.
And don't just because you're an Irish author, remember? Really.
Yeah. And that means I can drink green beer while I'm writing too, doesn't it?
Sounds good. Now, Sally Rose, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment for James?
Yes. Congratulations, James. And I just wanted to say you did a terrific interview. I really enjoyed it. I found it most entertaining. I'm from Texas too, and so I cannot wait to read your book.
Good.
Best of luck to you.
I hope you can relate to some of it. And email me or something. Just let me know, off the record what you think. I'd really like to hear that.
Okay. All right. I don't know what your email is, James, but I'll get it from Rama or something. Okay. Okay. I'm from Northeast Texas, so my experience may be a little different, but I'm sure I can relate. So thanks again, and best of luck to you.
Well, thank you, Sally.
Dolores, you've unmuted yourself.
I have. James, it's so nice to hear your interview today. I had to tell you that I have a long history with Texans. My son was actually born in Austin. He was a Texan for 2 weeks.
That's long enough.
Well, but I taught school there in Austin for 3 years. I wanted to just ask you, you're talking about the plans that you're making to promote your book, and that you're going to get this, your daughter to do this reception for you. Because I live in New Mexico, I would really love to be invited to that, and I will come down there and support you for that, since it's not that big of a drive for me, and I need a road trip anyway.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So just send me an email and let me know, and I'll put it on my calendar and make a point to do that.
Okay.
So we ought to actually have James do a couple of things. James, do you have a copy of your book that you can hold up right now? Maybe you can tell us the title. It does come through pretty good, but tell us the title, and why don't you also give your web address so that people can go to your website and join your newsletter and things like that. Okay.
Okay. So first, you wanted the title, Life Lessons for My Daughters, and the web address that we set up was www.jamesparkerauthor.com.
Sounds good. And show us that cover again, James. Put it up to the camera so we can see it.
It's funny, it looks reversed to me. I don't know if it looks reversed to you.
No, I think it comes through pretty good. You can see there's a windmill off to one of the corners, but I can't really see what else is there. Maybe you could describe it a little bit, just so people have a better idea of what's on the cover there.
Okay. Well, when I was talking to Greg and the guys about, or whoever I talked to about designing the cover, I said I want a gas tank, and that's really not a gas tank. It's a water tank, but it looks like a gas tank. We used to store tractor gas in a tank like that, and I almost killed myself. I caught on fire with gasoline, and so that's a big story there. We had an old barn, and I said I want an old corrugated steel barn, and so they put it on the cover for me, and that was a dangerous place, that barn, and I used to play Superman, getting in the loft of the barn and jumping out. And then I fell out once and almost bit my tongue off, so I stopped doing that. But they're just things that I recall, old barns and windmills. And if you want something really scary, go to West Texas when the wind's blowing about 50 miles an hour and stand next to a windmill, and it will scare the hell out of you. I mean, they make a lot of noise. You think they're going to take off and take you with them. But anyway, that windmill is a powerful symbol in West Texas, very powerful. And in the book, I say that Texans overstate, or they exaggerate a lot of things, but they don't exaggerate the wind. You can't exaggerate the wind in West Texas.
Jean, you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment for James?
Oh, James, I have so enjoyed your presentation today. And for me, you telling your story makes so much more impact. I hope you're going to consider making an audio book of the stories coming from you, or maybe doing short, YouTube video things. I think that would be a great way to promote your book. I mean, the way your eyes shine as you're telling the story, I can just imagine you as some young rascal running around with your high school buddies, and it's just so entertaining. You do a great job of just talking, and not many people have that skill. It is so natural for you.
Well, thank you. I used to be a really, really shy person when I was younger. I couldn't even open my mouth and get words to come out. Now I'm old and I don't care, What's the worst that can happen, But thank you very much.
Yeah, but, think about that. Radio spots, any way that you can give more voice and more life to your stories, I think it will help your sales, and I think you'd enjoy it.
I've thought about, and I haven't talked to Rama too much about it, but I've thought about having an Audible book, but I don't know if I would be the one to read it or not, because when I'm just talking, it's different than reading. I can put more enthusiasm. When I'm reading, I'm back in third grade trying to figure out the words, make sure I say it the right way. So, I was wishing that Andy Griffith would be the one to do my Audible book, but I guess it's too late for that. But I don't know. Is that something we do, Rama? We do a lot of Audible books. Do a lot of people do an Audible book?
This is actually an area that we are just starting to work with. A couple of our authors have done audio books. I have done several webinars on how to go about doing it, and perhaps it's time to redo one of those webinars. There is a company, there is a Amazon-owned company. There's two Amazon-owned companies. One is Audible, which is the biggest kind of spot for audiobooks as far as selling them, and then they have a production company called ACS, which is a way that authors can hook up with production people. And there are all kinds of different financial arrangements that can be made through that website. And of course, depending upon the financial arrangement, the profit is split that way. But what Jean mentioned, and I think that this is really important for all of us, is that we can do short videos where we're not necessarily reading our book, but we're talking about some of the stories. And I think that that is a critical component of everyone's digital marketing, because YouTube is the #2 search engine in the world. And of course, instead of Amazon owning YouTube, I think it's Google. So it's a big time sort of process, and it's done with keywords the same way as your website. And I was going to say, James, if we wanted to shoot some videos, I'll be back in New Mexico in Santa Fe in November, and we could probably set up a time and use one of the rooms that Body has, and we could shoot some of those stories that you tell. Because Jean was right. You did a great job of talking. And I want you all to know there's no prep involved with any of these interviews that I do. The authors say, oh, what do I have to do to get prepared for this? They say, oh, no, we don't do any preparation. This is all like right off the cuff. So you did a great job, and I do commend you. And
Hey, Rama, can I interrupt for a second?
Please.
So, when I was visualizing him speaking about the book or telling his story, I could almost see him walking around his childhood farm or where he grew up, and like pointing to the road, over there, I nearly died. Over there, I nearly got burned up. And over there, my friends, tried to take off my pants before I went to school. And maybe, I don't know if your reunion is back home where you're doing that. Maybe if someone can videotape you talking about your stories in the location where they occur, that would be totally awesome. As a thought.
Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of those places are so old, they're gone,
Oh, okay.
One of the things that I discovered and I just didn't ever think about it. When I was a kid, I only lived on a farm, and I lived on a corner of a cotton farm usually, and it was like flat dirt, and that was what I lived on. And I didn't know that wasn't the norm. And then it was the most exciting thing ever when I moved to Big Spring, Texas. And, Big Spring is not a big town or anything, but there were other kids. I didn't have to. My sister was my only playmate until I moved to town. I call that chapter In Town. And I was like really a rube, When I came to town, I tell it in the book, my dad and I were walking around. We were renting a house while we were having a house built. We gave up farming. My dad went to work as an aircraft mechanic, but we were walking around, and I was just having a great time, and I was talking real loud. And being from the farm, there was no reason not to talk loud, I guess. But when you were in town, you disturb the whole neighborhood. My dad says, James, be quiet. You're talking too loud. We're in town. Anyway, it never occurred to me that people would be able to hear me. But I appreciate all the comments. That was great. And I've only sold a few books. I bought a few books, but I need to really get with Denise and figure out what to do, next. I don't want to do something that I'm going to have to backtrack on. I shouldn't have done that. So do it this way instead. Then I have to, correct things. I just like to do it right the first time. And I think if I talk to Denise first, I'll probably have a better chance of doing it right the first time.
Sounds good. There was a question about the ebook. We don't have the ebook just yet. James just proofed his interior. I think it's in process, but I better make a note here just to make sure. And anyone else with a question for James before we sign off for today? Well, James, it looks like we've had a great interview. You've been a great interviewee. People really enjoy you as a storyteller. See, I've been telling James along from the start that he's a storyteller, and I think now he's starting to believe it. So, James, do you have any parting words of encouragement for other authors that haven't made it quite as far?
Yeah, I think if you don't listen to your left brain, if you release your, growing up in the technological era, all I ever wanted to do was play with computers and mess with cars and all kinds of things. But I think what you have to do is just ignore what your left brain is telling you and release your right brain so that you can, just, I don't know, it's just like give into your right brain. And that's one thing I have a hard time doing is that left brain was over there, this little devil sitting on my shoulder telling me, this isn't any good, your comma's out of place, you're this and you're that, and just forget all that stuff and use your right brain, use your creative side. And it was really hard for me to do that, but now I've just said, I'm a right brain person, and I'm gonna live with that, I'm gonna make the best of it. I don't need to go out and find a job doing computer programming anymore. I can use my right brain if I want to, But that would be my suggestion is just give in to the pressure of your right brain and forget your left brain.
James, that's great advice for all of us, and I'm going to end this with one last story from this process. Now, I remember James had a friend proofread his book, and he made a comment to that friend and said, okay, I want you to check out all the commas and make sure that they're all correct. Well, his friend literally did that. She checked out every comma that he had, and it did get kind of out of hand a little bit as a result. And I just thought that was one of the funniest components of this whole process working with you, James. I want to thank you again for sharing with us. And if there's anyone else that is ready for the hot seat and love to talk about their book, drop me an email. I know that there are some people getting very close, and I do have a number of authors that did get proofs this past week or two. So we should be able to get some more authors talking about their books. I really do love the interviews and hearing about the authors, and you're all so supportive of each other, and I just truly appreciate that. Thank you, James, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back next week with a topic of some sort. It is possible that we'll have one of our editors on. I'm still kind of fine-tuning that webinar. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. And Dolores, get in touch with me, and I'll send you that email or address and time for the launch.
I'll do that. I'll send you an email.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking forward to it.